In modern life, people face countless pressures, from work and family to societal expectations. We often strive to please others but forget one crucial thing: caring for and loving ourselves. There is a paradox that, while we can easily extend compassion to others, we tend to be harsh with ourselves. When we make mistakes, we blame ourselves. When we fail, we torment ourselves. When we suffer, we do not know how to offer ourselves comfort. However, in the teachings of the Buddha, compassion is not only directed toward others, it must also arise within us for ourselves. This video will help you understand what self-compassion truly means, why it is essential, and how to cultivate it in daily life. Through each lesson, we will explore practical methods, applying the Buddha's teachings in a way that allows us to find genuine peace and love within our own hearts. Self-compassion is not simply indulging oneself or excusing one's faults. Rather, it is a deep understanding, an unconditional acceptance, and a pure love for oneself. According to Buddhist teachings, compassion is not merely a form of sympathy, it is inseparable from wisdom. Only with wisdom can we see the true nature of life, recognize the impermanence and interdependent arising of all things, and thereby cultivate compassion not only for others but also for ourselves. Many of us find it easy to show compassion toward others. We readily forgive the mistakes of family members, friends, or even strangers. Yet, when it comes to ourselves, we are often harsh and unforgiving. A minor mistake can turn into an overwhelming burden, a failure can lead to endless self-criticism, and the words we say to ourselves can sometimes be far more cruel than anything anyone else might say. Why is this so? What is preventing us from truly loving ourselves? What is compassion? In Buddhism, compassion is regarded as the foundation of morality and enlightenment. The word metta, loving kindness, means bringing happiness to others, while karuna, compassion, means alleviating the suffering of sentient beings. When fully developed, compassion transforms into bodhicitta, the great aspiration to liberate all beings from the endless cycle of birth and death. However, compassion is not just something that extends outward, it must first be cultivated within. If we cannot be compassionate toward ourselves, how can we genuinely extend it to others? A person who does not know how to love themselves may end up offering love to others in a distorted way, driven by sacrifice, expectation, or obligation rather than true understanding. What does self-compassion mean? It is accepting ourselves as we are in the present moment without denying our faults but also without punishing ourselves for them. It is recognizing that we are not perfect, that we are just one being among countless others, subject to ignorance and the laws of karma. We make mistakes, we stumble, and we suffer. Self-compassion is about forgiving ourselves, not trapping ourselves in old wounds, and not allowing past mistakes to dictate our present and future. Many misunderstand self-compassion as being too lenient with oneself, indulging in emotions, or justifying one's wrongdoings. However, there is a vast difference between self-compassion and self-pity. Self-pity arises when we drown in negativity, blaming ourselves or lamenting our fate. When faced with difficulties, instead of finding ways to rise above them, we succumb to a sense of helplessness, seeing ourselves as victims of circumstances and waiting for an external savior. On the other hand, self-compassion is not weakness, it is a source of strength. When we practice self-compassion, we can confront our suffering with mindfulness and kindness. We understand that suffering is an inherent part of life, something that everyone experiences, yet we do not identify ourselves with suffering. We allow ourselves to feel pain, but we do not let pain control our lives. Self-compassion enables us to rise after falling, to learn from our mistakes without letting them become burdens that weigh us down. When we cultivate self-compassion, we learn to care for ourselves properly, to rest when needed, to encourage ourselves in times of difficulty, and most importantly, to live authentically as who we truly are. Why are we harder on ourselves than on others? It is paradoxical that we can easily forgive others yet struggle to forgive ourselves. When someone else makes a mistake, we may understand that they were under pressure or influenced by external factors. However, when we make mistakes, we often judge ourselves harshly, without mercy. This tendency can stem from several factors. 1. Cultural and societal conditioning. From a young age, we are taught to strive for success, to be perfect, and to meet the expectations set by our families and society. We become accustomed to evaluating our worth based on achievements and results. When we fall short of these expectations, we feel like failures, as if we are not good enough. 2. Guilt and fear. Many of us carry an invisible sense of guilt, whether from past mistakes or from holding ourselves to unrealistic expectations. We fear judgment, fear being seen as inadequate, so we impose rigid standards on ourselves in an effort to be flawless. 3. Identifying ourselves with our mistakes. When someone else makes a mistake, they may think, "I made a wrong decision." But when we err, we often think, "I am a terrible person." We do not just acknowledge our mistake as an action, we internalize it as a defining aspect of who we are, making it harder to forgive ourselves. 4. Lack of awareness of impermanence and interdependence. The Buddha taught that everything arises due to causes and conditions, nothing is fixed or unchanging. A mistake or failure does not define us, it is merely a lesson along life's journey. If we truly understand this, we will no longer be so harsh on ourselves. Many factors make it difficult for people to love themselves. Some feel that they are never good enough, constantly comparing themselves to others and believing that they must achieve something: success, wealth, recognition before they deserve love. But in reality, self-compassion is not conditional. We do not have to wait until we are perfect to love ourselves. We can start right now by accepting ourselves as we are. Common barriers to self-compassion include excessive self-criticism, pressure from family and society, past emotional wounds, fear of judgment, lack of awareness of one's intrinsic worth. To truly cultivate self-compassion, we must recognize these barriers and transform them through mindfulness, wisdom, and dedicated practice. Self-compassion is not an unattainable ideal. It begins with the smallest acts, offering ourselves words of encouragement during hardship, embracing our imperfections, and letting go of unnecessary burdens. When we truly develop self-compassion, life becomes lighter, and the love we share with others becomes more genuine. The Buddha, in his first sermon at the Deer Park, expounded the Four Noble Truths, with the first truth being dukkha, the reality of suffering. Every being in the cycle of birth and death is subject to suffering: birth, aging, illness, death, separation from loved ones, unfulfilled desires, encountering those we despise. However, the essence of his teaching is not merely the acknowledgement of suffering but the way we perceive and confront it. If we do not understand the nature of suffering, we will easily fall into the mindset of blame, believing ourselves to be unfortunate, or worse, thinking that suffering is a form of punishment. But when we cultivate wisdom and contemplate deeply, we will see that suffering can also serve as a means for growth, helping us to develop compassion not only for others but also for ourselves. What is suffering? Why must we endure it? In Buddhism, suffering is not merely physical or mental pain, it is also the inherent dissatisfaction, the impermanence of all that we desire. Sometimes, even what we consider happiness contains the seeds of suffering, for nothing lasts forever. Where does suffering arise from? From ignorance, from attachment and craving. When we long for something but cannot attain it, we suffer. When we attain it but fear losing it, we suffer. When we refuse to accept reality, our suffering deepens. Yet, if we look deeply into the nature of suffering, we will realize that it is neither a punishment nor a random misfortune but rather an inevitable consequence of causes and conditions. Every suffering we experience has its cause, and that cause does not originate from an external force but from the karma we have created in the past and present. People often blame fate, blame others, but few turn inward to examine themselves. According to the law of cause and effect, every action, word, and thought we generate plants a seed, and when conditions ripen, that seed will bear fruit. Suffering is no exception. It does not arise out of nowhere but is the result of the seeds we have sown. Thus, instead of fleeing from suffering or resenting it, we can face it with compassion and wisdom. When we understand that suffering is an intrinsic part of life, we will learn to accept it without bitterness, and more importantly, we will learn to use suffering as a tool to cultivate compassion toward ourselves. One of the deepest sources of suffering does not stem from external circumstances but from how we treat ourselves. When we make mistakes, we blame ourselves. When we fail, we torment ourselves. When we look back on the past, we reproach ourselves for not having done better. Yet, the Buddha taught that all beings are still within the cycle of birth and death, still veiled by ignorance. So mistakes are inevitable. What matters is not how many mistakes we have made, but what we have learned from them. Accepting our own imperfections does not mean indulging in our faults or resigning to complacency, but rather recognizing them with clarity and without harsh judgment. When we see our shortcomings clearly, we can correct them with a calm and loving heart, instead of drowning in guilt and self-reproach. A person with compassion for themselves will know how to console themselves when they stumble, how to encourage themselves in times of hardship, and most importantly, how to forgive themselves. We may have acted wrongly, but that does not make us bad people. We may have failed, but failure does not define who we are. To truly accept ourselves, we must first understand that we, like all other beings, are imperfect and are on a journey of learning and growth. We do not need to be perfect to love ourselves. We can love ourselves in our very imperfection, and from that love, we will find the strength to rise and better ourselves. Two of the most fundamental Buddhist teachings are the law of cause and effect and the principle of impermanence. If we deeply understand these two principles, we will know how to let go of attachments and embrace ourselves with compassion. The law of cause and effect teaches us that everything in life has a cause. If we encounter suffering today, it is not the injustice of fate but the natural consequence of our past actions. However, cause and effect are not fixed, for in each present moment, we can create new causes that transform our future outcomes. When we understand cause and effect, we will cease blaming ourselves for what has happened and instead take proactive steps toward transformation by cultivating wholesome actions in the present. The principle of impermanence teaches us that nothing in life is eternal, not even the suffering we experience. When we truly grasp this, we will no longer cling to negative emotions, for we understand that they, too, will pass. One of the most effective practices for cultivating self-compassion is meditative contemplation on impermanence. When we feel overwhelmed by suffering, we can reflect that this emotion is not a fixed aspect of who we are, but merely a passing state. When we face failure, we can remind ourselves that this failure is but a fleeting moment in the flow of life, and if we persevere, things will change. Being compassionate toward ourselves does not mean making excuses for bad habits or surrendering to weakness, rather, it is a deep understanding and wholehearted acceptance of who we are. When we truly embrace ourselves with compassion, we will no longer torment ourselves with negative thoughts, no longer punish ourselves for the past, and no longer force ourselves to become someone other than we truly are. Inner peace does not come from eliminating suffering entirely, but from knowing how to face suffering with wisdom and compassion. When we cultivate self-compassion, we will learn to care for ourselves properly, to encourage ourselves when needed, and most importantly, to free ourselves from unrealistic expectations. Self-compassion is not something distant or difficult to attain. It is simply a gentle acceptance, a sincere forgiveness, and an unconditional love for ourselves. When we can practice this, we will realize that suffering is no longer a burden but a tool for our growth, leading us toward genuine peace and liberation. Meditation is the path that allows us to return to ourselves, illuminate the mind, and awaken wisdom. More importantly, it is a profound method to cultivate compassion for oneself. Only when our mind is still can we truly see ourselves clearly without judgment, without blame, just pure understanding and acceptance. There are many forms of meditation in Buddhism, but loving-kindness meditation, metta-bhavana, is a direct practice that helps us develop love and compassion for ourselves. This is not self-indulgence in the conventional sense, but rather a way of caring for and embracing ourselves with kindness and deep understanding. Loving-kindness meditation, or metta meditation, is widely practiced in the Theravada Buddhist tradition and is also emphasized in Mahayana schools as a means of cultivating compassion. In life, we often extend love and care to others but forget that we too need love and nurturing. Many of us have the habit of self-criticism, blaming ourselves for our mistakes, sometimes even being harsher on ourselves than on others. This burden weighs heavily on our hearts, causing suffering without our awareness. Metta meditation helps dissolve these hidden knots within the mind, liberate feelings of inadequacy, and teach us to view ourselves with gentleness and compassion. Practicing metta meditation for oneself. 1. Choose a quiet space. Sit comfortably with a straight but relaxed posture. Let your body loosen, gently close your eyes. 2. Turn your attention inward. Before sending love to others, we must first generate loving kindness toward ourselves. Place one hand over your heart, feel the rhythm of your breath, and recognize that in this very moment, you are deserving of love. 3. Offer yourself well wishes. Silently repeat, "May I be happy. May I be peaceful and content. May I be healthy and free from suffering. May I cherish myself as I would a dear friend." 4. Feel the warmth of compassion spreading. Do not merely recite these words mechanically. Instead, let yourself deeply feel the love emanating from within. Let each phrase sink into your being, allowing its gentle energy to soothe any wounds in your heart. 5. Rest in stillness. After completing the practice, remain seated in silence, feeling the tranquility that has settled within. If practiced regularly, self-compassion will gradually grow, and we will no longer feel estranged from ourselves. Breath is an essential part of life, yet few truly pay attention to their own breathing. In the rush of daily life, we become caught up in worries and forget that our breath can be a gateway to self-compassion. Breath meditation helps us return to ourselves, clearly recognize our mental states without judgment. When we focus on the breath, we realize that each inhalation nourishes us, and each exhalation releases tension. Breath awareness meditation. 1. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and bring awareness to your breath. 2. Observe each inhalation and exhalation, without modifying or controlling it, simply witness. 3. As you inhale, silently say, "I am breathing in, I am nourishing myself." 4. As you exhale, silently say, I am breathing out, I release all tension. 5. Continue with gentleness, without forcing the breath in any way. With regular practice, we will realize that self-compassion is not something distant, but rather the simple act of accepting and caring for ourselves with each breath. One of the simplest ways to cultivate self-compassion is to send ourselves words of kindness and encouragement. When a close friend faces hardship, we naturally comfort and support them. But when we ourselves struggle, we often fail to offer the same kindness. Imagine yourself as your own best friend and extend to yourself the same well wishes you would offer to a dear companion. Tell yourself, no matter what happens, I am always worthy of love. I allow myself to be happy. I forgive myself for past mistakes. I honor myself and all the efforts I have made. When these affirmations become a part of our thinking, they gradually transform self-criticism into self-acceptance and appreciation. Self-compassion is not limited to seated meditation but can be integrated into daily life. Whenever stress arises, take a few deep breaths and recall the blessings you have offered yourself. When facing difficulties, approach them with gentleness without self-judgment or blame. When engaging in any activity, do so with love and mindfulness. Compassion is not something mystical or beyond reach. It is simply the way we treat ourselves in each moment of life. If we dedicate even a few minutes each day to practicing self-compassion, whether through meditation, breath awareness, or self-affirmations over time, this kindness will become a natural part of our being. And when we have cultivated compassion for ourselves, we will effortlessly extend it to others, making life lighter, more peaceful, and filled with love. Words possess immense power. A kind word can uplift a soul, while a harsh word can shatter a life. This truth applies not only to how we speak to others but also to how we speak to ourselves. In life, we often hear about the importance of communication with others, about the art of social etiquette, and about gentle speech to maintain relationships. But few teach us how to converse with ourselves. Deep within the mind, there exists an ongoing internal dialogue. Sometimes, it consists of encouragement and motivation, but other times, it manifests as criticism, judgment, and self-inflicted pain. The Buddha taught that the human mind is like a garden. If we sow seeds of kindness and virtue, the garden will bloom with peace and happiness. Conversely, if we allow negative thoughts to overrun it, it will be filled with the weeds of suffering and distress. Have we ever reflected on how we speak to ourselves? Are the words we whisper to ourselves each day words of love? Or are they words of blame and criticism that cause our hearts to wither and dry up? People tend to be harder on themselves than they are on others. When we make a mistake, we often say, "Why am I so careless? I'm so incompetent. I always mess things up, I can't do anything right." These words may seem insignificant, but they gradually seep into our subconscious, shaping a negative self-image. Take a moment to reflect. If a friend made a mistake, would we speak to them this way? Or would we reassure them by saying, "It's okay, everyone makes mistakes. What matters is that we learn and improve"? If we can offer kind words to others, why can't we offer them to ourselves? Self-criticism does not make us better, it only burdens the heart and erodes confidence. The Buddha taught that every being possesses Buddha nature and the capacity for awakening. Mistakes are simply a part of the journey of growth, and we must face them with compassion rather than harshness. Take some time to observe your thoughts. When faced with difficulty, are you comforting yourself or causing yourself more suffering? If you notice that your inner voice is negative, pause and replace it with kinder words. When a child learns to walk, they stumble many times. But if each time they fall, we scold them, "Why are you so clumsy? You can't do anything right," would that child have the courage to keep trying? However, if we gently say, "It's okay, stand up and try again. You'll get there," the child will feel encouraged and eventually succeed. Our minds work the same way. If we constantly berate ourselves, we will lose confidence and motivation. But if we know how to encourage ourselves, we will find the strength to persevere. Try replacing negative thoughts with uplifting affirmations. When facing failure, instead of saying, "I'm so useless," say, "I did my best, and I will learn something from this experience." When making a mistake, instead of saying, "I always mess up," say, "Everyone makes mistakes, what matters is that I learn from them." When feeling inadequate, instead of saying, "I'm nothing special," say, "I have my own unique value, and I am worthy of love." At first, these words may feel unnatural because we are so accustomed to self-criticism. But with consistent practice, we will begin to notice a transformation within ourselves. One powerful way to cultivate self-compassion is to write a letter to yourself. Imagine writing to a dear friend, someone who has endured hardships, experienced sorrow, and yet has continued striving. That friend is you. Take a piece of paper and write down what you would say to yourself. "I know you've been through many difficulties, but you have tried your best, and that is truly admirable. You don't have to be perfect, because no one in this world is perfect. You are worthy of love, not just from others, but also from yourself." When you finish, read the letter with sincerity. Let these words sink into your heart, allowing yourself to truly feel the gentleness and compassion within. The mind is like a flowing river. If we constantly pour negativity into it, the waters will become murky and heavy. But if we nurture it with wholesome thoughts, it will become clear and light. Whenever a negative thought arises, do not suppress it. Instead, gently recognize and transform it. If you think, "I'm not good enough," remind yourself, "I am improving every day, and that is something to be proud of." If you think, "I don't deserve happiness," remind yourself, "Everyone deserves happiness, and so do I." If you think, "No one understands me," ask yourself, "Have I truly taken the time to understand myself?" Do not wait for someone else to say kind words to you. Say them to yourself. Because the one who will accompany you throughout your entire life is none other than yourself. When we learn to speak words of kindness to ourselves, our hearts will become more peaceful. Each passing day, we will feel lighter and warmer inside. And when we are filled with love from within, it will naturally radiate outward, touching the lives of those around us. Words hold immense power. Let us use them to nurture a heart full of love, beginning with ourselves. Compassion is not merely a concept or an abstract philosophy, it must be transformed into concrete action in daily life. Only when we genuinely practice compassion toward ourselves through our thoughts, words, and actions can we experience true peace. A lotus flower cannot bloom on its own without care and nourishment. Likewise, compassion cannot remain just a wish, it must be continuously cultivated until it becomes a natural part of our consciousness. When compassion becomes a habit, life feels lighter. We are no longer burdened by guilt, self-reproach, or the constant pursuit of perfection. We learn to accept ourselves, recognize our own value, and find joy in the simplest things. Many of us have a habit of prioritizing the needs of others while neglecting ourselves. We often believe that taking time for ourselves is selfish or wasteful. We worry that if we pause to rest, we might miss opportunities, fail to complete our tasks, or disappoint others. However, if we do not take the time to care for ourselves, how can we continue to serve others in the long run? A person who is constantly stressed, exhausted, and worn out will struggle to bring joy to others. The Buddha taught that before we can help sentient beings, we must first nurture ourselves. Learn to take time for yourself without feeling guilty. This does not mean becoming indifferent or irresponsible, but rather understanding and respecting your own limits. Every day, set aside moments to relax, breathe, read a book, or simply sit in stillness. Do not see these moments as a luxury, recognize them as essential to cultivating compassion. If our minds are always entangled in stress and worries, we will never truly experience peace. When we take time to care for ourselves, we are planting seeds of serenity in our consciousness. From there, we will have the strength to walk our path with stability and ease. Gratitude should not only be directed toward others or the good things in life, it must also include ourselves. Throughout our lives, we have faced countless challenges and hardships. There were times when we fell, yet we stood up again. There were moments when we thought we could not go on, yet we continued. We have persevered and put in great effort, but we often forget to thank ourselves. Practicing gratitude toward ourselves allows us to recognize the good we have done rather than focusing solely on our imperfections. Each day, take a moment to say, "Thank you for doing your best today. Thank you, feet, for carrying me to many places. Thank you, heart, for beating tirelessly, allowing me to live and love." Gratitude does not need to be grand, it is found in the simplest things. When we appreciate what we have, our hearts naturally become lighter and more peaceful. One of the biggest obstacles to self-love is the pursuit of perfection. We constantly push ourselves to do better, achieve more, and become greater. When we fail to meet these expectations, we feel disappointed and blame ourselves. But the truth is, no one in this world is perfect. The Buddha taught that everything in existence is impermanent, constantly changing and evolving. Likewise, humans are not born complete, we learn, stumble, and grow. Letting go of perfectionism does not mean giving up or becoming complacent. It means learning to accept ourselves. Allow yourself to make mistakes and learn from them. Look at your shortcomings with kindness rather than judgment. When we stop chasing perfection, we begin to experience life more fully. We no longer feel pressured to become an ideal version of ourselves but instead embrace who we truly are. Compassion is not something grand, it is found in the small acts of kindness we practice every day. Taking care of ourselves in the simplest ways is a form of cultivating compassion, eating mindfully, appreciating the nourishment we receive, resting when needed, without pushing our bodies to exhaustion, engaging in activities that bring joy to our hearts, such as reading, listening to music, or meditating, treating ourselves with the same gentleness and understanding we would offer a dear friend. The Buddha taught that our minds are like a field, and our daily habits are the seeds we plant. If we sow seeds of love, acceptance, and gratitude, over time, a garden of peace will flourish within us. Compassion is not a state we attain overnight, it is a lifelong journey. On this path, every thought and action we take can be a step forward. If we nurture it a little each day, compassion will gradually become a natural part of our lives. And when compassion has become a habit, practicing it will no longer feel like an obligation. We will no longer need to remind ourselves to love ourselves because that love will already be an intrinsic part of us, like the breath we take, like the morning sunlight. When we truly learn to love ourselves, we will experience deep serenity. No longer will we allow past wounds, societal expectations, or external standards to dictate our happiness. And from that place of inner peace, we will be able to share love with those around us, helping them find their own sense of tranquility and joy. Compassion for oneself is not weakness or self-indulgence, it is a vital practice that allows us to live a life of peace and fulfillment. When we learn to love and be kind to ourselves, we cultivate the inner strength needed to love and support others. Remember, no one is perfect, and you do not need to be perfect to deserve love. Begin today, smile at yourself, embrace who you are, and practice compassion in every moment of your life.